I recently watched a video by The Dark Stuff, and I thought he had such a cool topic. He had seen 23andMe or Ancestry.com, the whole DNA tests, which are everywhere, and most people have probably done them. Some of us probably regret it a little bit, knowing that we could be cloned in some I don't know some future time, or our genetic code can be for sale. But anyway, that's a different topic. I thought it was really cool though, this idea of picking your musical DNA. Like what makes you the fan or the artist or this great appreciator of music that you are now. What are those formative bands? And he put it between like the ages of like 23 and under, like for 23 chromosomes, DNA, and 23 and under. I would probably go a little bit further than that, but these are all clearly, most of them are probably, between like 12 and 18. And then there's probably some that might go to like 26, 27. Definitely none of these go into the 30s for sure for me. And, it's interesting thinking about this topic too, because I realized that we try, our channels talking about music, we try to turn people on to things. And I think sometimes we want to turn people on to the extent that we were turned on to one of these formative bands that like make up our musical DNA. And it's kind of impossible in some ways. I mean, I've certainly gotten into things that I've been obviously turned on to in the last like several years, but I don't always, it's probably gonna be very, very rare for me to come across something and have it be feel like such a core part of me, or something that springs into numerous other things with a level of obsession. I think a lot of us get into obsession now with like wanting out everything, wanting out, entire catalogs on vinyl, rebuying things, buying special editions, buying clear vinyl, whatever. But I think it's a little rarer for people to find some new artist or new to them and go super deep to the point where it becomes like one of your favorites of all time. And maybe it's because you just hear a lot by the time you're 30. Not to say it doesn't happen, and I'm always, looking for new music and get turned on to things. But these records or these artists are probably the ones that, if I pick 23, that sort of springed into other things or were played pretty obsessively. I think all of these, except for maybe one, had a real clear command of their entire catalog at one point or another. Probably still could name like 6 or 7 songs, if not the entire track listing, off of most, if not every one of the records. It was that kind of musical obsessiveness. So anyway, starting, I'm going alphabetically ordered, just like the Dark Stuff did. Some of these bands I was way, way more into than others. I'll get into that. Starting out, brief period into, I guess about 4 years, I was really into Aerosmith. This is a totally beat up looking copy, but actually it plays really well. I got it like a few years ago. I had the tape forever. I played it obsessively. I remember playing it on the way to school. When I would drive to school and back, I would play like this, or I'd play rocks for, I don't know, it seemed like a year. Um, I think, I got turned on to them like a lot of people from my generation with Permanent Vacation. And I liked it, and I saw them twice on that tour, which I'd kind of forgotten about the first time until recently when I found a ticket stub. Both in 1988, early in 1988, like in the winter, I think. And then I saw them in the summer, and Guns N' Roses opened up, and it was a killer show. And actually, Guns N' Roses announced that their album went to #1 at that show. So yeah, really cool show, really cool band. They were great at the time, and I don't know, Permanent Vacation was pretty good. Pump was great. Pump, I used to play Pump right alongside, you know, Toys in the Attic and Rocks, and it sounded great. I think it probably still would have though. I stopped listening to Aerosmith new stuff after like that album. Really, Get a Grip kind of lost me with the Alicia Silverstone videos and the endless kind of ballads and stuff. But I just would stand by for sure those first four Aerosmiths, especially Toys in the Attic and Rocks. The next is something completely different. Vic Chestnut. I got really into him in the early 90s, like, I don't know, or more like mid 90s, I guess, like 95 ish, 94, 95. And I followed him, until he unfortunately passed away, boy, probably at least a decade ago now. Brilliant, brilliant songwriter. I absolutely love the first four records that he did on Texas Hotel: Little, West of Rome, Drunk, and Is the Actor Happy? Unbelievable, unique style. Great story. I'm gonna do like a deep dive into Vic at some point, but you really can't go wrong with those first four records. But there's other places, those are more stripped down, more homemade. If you want something a little bit more polished, I mean, even his last studio record, At the Cut, is a great place to start, or the one he did with Lamb Chop, The Salesman, and Bernadette. Um, Alice Cooper, 1986, he had a comeback tour, The Constrictor, and he was kind of all over the news. And I heard some kind of promos, I think, or might have seen him on like Entertainment Tonight. And I bought Constrictor and I liked it. It was kind of a heavy metal record, but I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty funny, a lot of the lyrics. I haven't listened to that in probably 30 years at least. But I quickly picked up Alice Cooper's greatest hits after that and just was blown away by the humor, by the songwriting, by his voice, and that got me to pick up Billion Dollar Babies and Live to Death and Killer and Welcome to Nightmare and everything by Alice, and saw him soon afterwards on that Raise Your Fist and Yell tour. Another one here. So going alphabetically in alphabetical order, Blood on the Tracks, Bob Dylan. Or just Bob Dylan. Just say Bob Dylan. We're talking about albums here. But I had always respected Bob Dylan as a songwriter and liked the covers. It wasn't until I heard his greatest hits that I was like, holy shit, this guy wrote all these songs. Oh my God. Then I remember on a road trip, probably from Minneapolis to where my parents live in Wisconsin, I listened to Blood on the Tracks and it completely blew me away. And then definitely into my mid 20s, I got really into like Highway 61 and Blonde on Blonde and Bringing It All Back Home, and ended up getting like, all the Dylan records and still follow him to this day and love what he does now. Just almost just as much, if not more in some ways. Next on my list alphabetically here is Guided by Voices. Saw them in 1995, bought the record the same day that I saw them live, having just heard a couple songs prior to that. The album blew me away, the concert blew me away. I remain a fan today. Guided by Voices kind of changed the way I see kind of, do-it-yourself kind of basement rock. And also just the fact that, and I'm continually reminded of this, I think you'll see this come up a few times in this video. I'm continually reminded that you can just do that at such a small scale. Your friends in a basement, drinking beer, putting out a record as brilliant as this, and they've got plenty of other brilliant records too. Amazing live. Loved them the second I dropped the needle on this, and it was reinforced when I saw them at a small club later on that same night. The next one for me was one of the artists, and definitely this is one of the records I played the absolute most. It was probably worn out, the tape, just over and over and over when I was like 16 years old. Could not believe how good it was. The lyrics were killer. The songs just rocked. The vocalist, I thought, seemed like it was like 4 or 5 different vocalists. I don't know if you notice that as much now. Probably don't pick up on that. But at the time, it was just like, is this the same guy singing these high parts and low parts? And it blew all the other hair metal bands, all that Poison and Motley Crue and Bon Jovi shit completely away. It was Guns N' Roses. And to me, they were like going to be the Rolling Stones of the late 80s and 90s. And I think they just totally shit the bed. I in some ways I never forgive them for letting success go to their heads. I was thinking the other day they're more like the Sex Pistols when I wanted them to be like the Rolling Stones. They blew out so early. That bloated double Use Your Illusion thing I can't stand. It could make maybe a good record, but it's just way too bloated. And now they're touring essentially this record all these years later. And have very little new material to show from it, or since I heard that record, really. Next for me is, one of the most provocative, cool bands, one of the most revolutionary bands I thought that I ever listened to growing up, and completely changed things a lot for me because they bridged sort of the punk stuff and the alternative with the hard rock, and made it all like really cool and edgy and intense. And oh my God, I remember reading this Rolling Stone article about them like a year before, how they were like LA's biggest band or something. That just got signed, and the singer was wearing like bib overalls and no shirt underneath and watering his plants in the garden. It was just like, what is this? And I noticed their album Nothing Shocking on the racks. How could you not? 2 naked Siamese women with their hair on fire, or Siamese twins with their hair on fire. And I bought it, and I hadn't heard a single note of it, and it completely blew me away. I mean, from the first song, Up the Beach, and it went from there. I mean, I just was completely obsessed with them. Got their first album, This might have been like the most eagerly awaited album for me. I could not wait for Ritual de Habitual to come out. Unfortunately, I mean, it's great. It's a great album. I especially love the second half of it. I absolutely adore Nothing Shocking. I don't have it on vinyl because I can't stand that they took one of the songs off of it, and I won't support that. But I played it to death. I mean, the tape, you couldn't even read anything on it anymore. Great band. Unbelievable chemistry between the four members. Kind of too bad it blew up. I really can't get into all these new incarnations that might call themselves that, but are missing various members. But I'm always hopeful maybe, they'll do something decent again. But those first three albums, including the live one, the first one, great stuff. And really pivotal for me, and yeah, probably once when I was getting away from the hard rock stuff, they sort of brought it back, but they did it in such a cool, edgy way. It was like totally new. Another album for me, or band for me rather, is Led Zeppelin. Now I had heard Led Zeppelin 4, I had it on cassette. It didn't do much for me. I mean, I love Stairway to Heaven. I think I love Going to California. Black Dog sounded like really old fashioned and really old fogey or something. I just didn't dig it. I liked it, but then I met my friend Mike, who like basically would send me home from his house. We'd hang out after school, like 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, send me home with a tape, another Zeppelin tape. Now I'm going to introduce you to Physical Graffiti. Okay, you ready for this? This is Led Zeppelin too. I think it was probably House of the Holy that blew me away the most, or it's definitely the one now that is probably my favorite, although it kind of depends on the day. The next band for me kind of came a little later. This might be pushing it for me into like, I don't know, 26 maybe. At a time when I started to think that a record could never completely blow me away like the records had when I was younger. It seems a little weird to think that at 26, but I think it's kind of true, I can't say that I've had an album affect me the same way that some of these records or some of these bands' other records have done in the last 10 years or even 20 years, unfortunately. Not to say I don't really like them, I do, but there's something about these certain artists and hitting it at a certain time that just is unbelievable. And for me, this one was Neutral Milk Hotel, and especially this album. Unbelievable. Something so unique and different and just spoke to you. And this whole like Anne Frank time travel, interesting voice, intensity, so much intensity. I was like in the third row at a small club and saw them, and it was almost scary intense. My friend and I were like laughing because we were like, holy shit, this is fucking intense. But yeah, this album, great album. Don't listen to it much these days. It kind of feels like it's almost like a time and place kind of record, but it's definitely going to make like 23 records that are, or 23 artists rather, I keep saying records, that are in my DNA. Yeah, Neutral Milk Hotel for sure. Now, I almost forgot to include this next artist, and I'm looking at my list, I'm looking at my records behind me, and I'm like, why in the world would I not include her? Like, oh my God, talk about pivotal, talk about something that I was obsessed over and that sort of changed my political view on things and just was so much raw emotion and just spoke to me at like 15, 16 years old. Like, very few records did, is Sinead O'Connor, The Lion and the Cobra. I absolutely love this record. It's unbelievable. I think, of course she gets a bad rap now. The Pope thing, and she unfortunately became a joke and to some people, and bashed because of the Pope incident, and people look at her back at her now and not really see, I think, what we all saw when we got into this album especially, and then the next one too. I Do Not Want What I Have Not Got is incredible as well. But holy shit, I picked this up in a record store. Like, I'd never heard a note of it, hadn't heard Mandica or any of the songs. Saw the cover. I think I might have read something about it, in a magazine. I think I was familiar with her name maybe. Saw it, I was like, I'll get that. And oh wow, really special record. I mean, from Jackie to Just Call Me Joe. I mean, it's yeah. I don't listen to it that often. When I do, I don't put it on the background. She gets my full attention. Sinead O'Connor, definitely a pivotal artist for me, and definitely in my 23. Now, I don't know if it's just my age at the time, being of a certain generation that came of age in like the late 80s, or I suppose if you came of age in the late 70s, it'd be the same thing. I don't know if it's still quite as impactful for people now. I think maybe they'll gravitate to other records, but for me, the the album that got me really into Pink Floyd was The Wall. I listened to it obsessively. Don't listen to it that much anymore. It kind of went from The Wall to um, Sid Barrett, Piper at the Gates of Dawn type era in college, and then after that, it was sort of Wish You Were Here and Animals, kind of going back and forth for the longest time. I mean, I still really love both those records a lot, and most recently, it's been kind of come full circle, getting into Dark Side of the Moon more, which I always respected way more than I loved. So, Pink Floyd. Next is the Pixies. I mean, what can I say? This album, this album is incredible. I had seen, I think, something on MTV where they did a little feature about the Pixies, and they played clips of Here Comes Your Man and Monkey Gone to Heaven. This was the first CD I ever bought. I'm transitioning from cassettes and vinyl a little bit in the early days. Um, and I was very careful about what I wanted to buy because I didn't have much money and knew it'd be a little while before I'd buy another CD. They were quite expensive compared to cassettes. And I bought the Pixies Doolittle, and it had such a cool booklet, and it was such a killer record and so intriguing. I just remember thinking, I don't care if I don't buy another CD. For a long time, I absolutely love this record. And it was great being a Pixies fan at that point. I mean, I remember like just going to a record store in Madison and Bossa Nova was on the shelf. It's like, whoa, there's a new album? Like, you know, pre-internet days, sometimes that happened with these bands. You just like show up at a record store and your favorite band had a new CD on the counter. But yeah, I love the Pixies back then. Not so much these days. But the next one for me, Prince. It took me a little while to get into him because he was everywhere, and it's like I don't know, like dancing around in the high heels and stuff when you're 12. You know, you could be a little judgmental about that stuff. But as he put out the follow-ups to Purple Rain, I mean, I always liked Purple Rain a little bit. I mean, how can you not? But it's the follow-ups, the singles, the Raspberry Beret, like holy crap, Pop Life, Kiss. That might have been the final one that was just like, oh my god, I love this stuff. And then I started really getting into the albums, and you know, Sign of the Times was one of them. Another one that I absolutely love is Love Sexy. Unfortunately, after Batman, I think you really get diminishing returns from him. But boy, those '80s string of records are unbelievable. Prince, how can you not include Prince if you were, I don't know, a certain age? And yeah, great band, or great artist, Prince. Another one for me, again, kind of coming at a time when I thought, well, maybe I can't get into things quite the way I used to, you know, comes along the third record from this band from the UK that you know, I had heard the second one, the Bends, and I liked it a lot, and I listened to it a lot. But oh my God, when OK Computer came out, unbelievable, obsessing over lyrics, so interesting. It just rocked, and it was like, you know, had these moving slow songs and seemed like it came from another planet, and it's talking all about technology and computers and I mean, my God. I mean, he's talking about today. I was talking about 10 years ago. It's talking about everything kind of we're really dealing with I think now. And I will take this over Kid A any day. I think Kid A is great. I think it's more of an idea than it is an album. And I think it's real. I think if you were to print out the lyric sheets of this compared to Kid A, I mean, this is probably twice as much content. It's just a lot of ideas in it, and a lot of musical ideas too. But Radiohead became a band that, yeah, I'm still really into. I saw them in last time in the tour for Moonshaped Pool at the Greek Theater in Berkeley, and it was just as incredible as you think it would be. Yeah, great band. Next for me is probably the most pivotal band for me that I ever got into, because they changed everything. I mean, people talk about the Beatles if you're a certain age, right? You see them on Ed Sullivan, and it's like, you know, black and white turned to color, and you've got all these like, you know, imitation bands that sparked a whole, you know, garage band kind of do it yourself. You knew people could write songs, you know, all that stuff, and not rely on songwriters. For me, it was, if you think about like 1987, you know, you think about what's on the charts. It's all and hair metal, and oh my god, you know, it started out good, I think, and it just got just layers upon layers and layers of cheese, and like, oh, just some god awful bands, you know, from the mid to late '80s. It just got embarrassing. It was just so bad, you know. And the lyrics were just like so misogynistic and just about like nothing and just crap. I'll do a whole thing on that maybe someday, but I definitely had a toe in it. I listened to a lot of those bands, but so I got into this band and kind of through a trade. I had this compilation called White Boy Blues or White Man's Blues or something like that, and it was through Columbia, probably record club that I got, and I think it had Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and Eric Clapton, and I just couldn't get into it. It was like I don't know leftovers from maybe Yardbird sessions or something. And a friend of mine had a copy of Murmur by this band R.E.M. and I traded it for him. He's like, "Yeah, my sister, she's in college. She really likes this. I can't get into it." I listened to it a lot, trying to get into it, and I really couldn't. I liked Radio for Europe, and I think I liked Perfect Circle, and I liked Catapult. The rest of it, I just kind of couldn't get into. But I kept hearing Fall on Me on the radio because this is like 1986, and I was like, God, this guy's got such a baritone, and such a low voice. I mean, now I think it's like water, you know, and you don't even notice it. But I was like really intrigued by them. They didn't have MTV at the time. I'd never seen like videos of theirs until the One I Love came out. Actually, I think I bought the album before I ever saw a video of that too. But anyway, the One I Love hits, Document comes out, and I buy Document and Life's Rich Pageant on the same day because I was already interested. I had already heard Fall on Me a lot, so I buy the cassettes of Document and Life's Rich Pageant, and became completely obsessed with this band. Still, they're defunct now, but I mean, they still put out reissues and archive material. Um, great band. It's I want to do a whole thing on them sometime too. I feel like they kind of got lost. There's so many imitators. There's so many bands that take elements of them that they just it's like impossible to get back to that, like how special this band was at the time. But this band, more than anything, changed the way I look at music. Really, I went from the sea of cheese hair metal bands, and listening to a lot of Led Zeppelin, The Doors, and a little bit of Rolling Stones, though I didn't get deep into them till later. And just I don't know, new wave, things like the Cars and the Cure. There were definitely things I was listening to, but these guys from the United States, and I saw them at a time when they still played a really small place. They must have booked the tour before this single, The One I Love, broke, and it changed everything. So, and when I say it changed everything, I was able to see things in a much smaller, intimate way. I didn't have to go to these huge shows with things flying over your head and a guy on a surfboard surfing the audience and all that crap, right? And it can be cool, but it became much more intimate. I could see the people. I didn't have to watch a video screen. They weren't ants. People were dancing around me, like having fun. And all their albums. I think I bought all their albums and saw them within like a month or two, month and a half or 2 months tops, from getting Document and Life's Rich Pageant, and the concert blew me away. And more than anything, too, they introduced me to a tons of bands because I'd read everything I could about them. Velvet Underground, Television, Big Star. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And contemporaries at the time too. I mean, they talked about the Replacements and other bands like that too. But yeah, unbelievable influence on me. Probably number one on this list if I was to rank them. Another one that had a big influence on me, especially in college, is the Replacements. I had heard Pleased to Meet Me. I checked it out from a library when I was like 15, and I liked it. I liked Skyway. I liked Can't Hardly Wait. I liked Alex Chilton, but I wasn't like super into it. I mean, I didn't buy it. I returned it. I checked out the vinyl record and I returned it. Then I saw I'll Be You video and heard that song and liked it quite a bit and was intrigued by them. And it wasn't until I got All Shook Down that I was like, holy crap, do I love this? I love this band. Oh my God. And then I had it, it was, and then I remember I dubbed Let It Be, Tim, and Stink all in one like 90-minute tape. And if I had to pick one that really, really got me into them, it would probably be Tim. I always say that the Replacements, it's Tim has the best songs. And for me, and it's always about the songs for me. And Let It Be has the best sound, and I tend to think that Please Meet Me has like the best combination of the two. But you cannot go wrong with this band, and I think they influenced me so much on songwriting too. I dabble in songwriting, and Westerberg is our best, I think. I don't know. He wastes his talent a lot. Get a little pissed at him for that, but my God, does he have enough where he could just rest on his laurels? He deserves that too. The next one for me is Springsteen, and it's probably not what you think unless you watch some of my previous videos, especially the one I did on Springsteen, where I think I mentioned this. It's not Born in the USA. It's not those previous records like Darkness on the Edge of Town or Born to Run. If I was to pick one to show right now, or what was a catalyst for him being such an influence and being one of these like top 23 artists for me in my DNA, musical DNA, it's The Ghost of Tom Joad. I love the storytelling. I was at the right age, right time. I was probably 22, 23 years old when this came out, and I saw him on tour, and oh my god, he played like stripped down versions of all those songs off songs off Nebraska, which I quickly bought after this, and it blew me away just as much, if not more. And then Dark Side Edge of Town, Born to Run, but it was getting into, and I'd sort of gotten into it with a box set from a few years before, 10 years before that, but it was really having him be this current artist that toured without the E Street Band, and just like really bringing these stories and this songwriting and driving it home in a way, an acoustic way that was probably similar to like almost like a Vic Chestnut type of thing, or like a Jack Logan thing, or something. One of the more singer-songwriter things I was listening to at the time. So hit me at the right spot then to really make me a fan, where I had to hear everything and was becoming very very obsessed with them. Next for me is, an example of an R.E.M. Recommendation. I kept hearing about, you've got to get the first album by the Velvet Underground. And I went to a record store in Kansas City, and I bought two albums. I bought the self-titled one, thinking that was the first one. It's called The Velvet Underground. And I bought White Light, White Heat. Didn't like White Light, White Heat. Still, I like it now, but it's still not it's probably the fourth of those four records on my list. But I absolutely love the third one. I thought just still love it. It's probably my favorite, if not this one, which is I found out later is their first album, the Velvet Underground and Nico. But such an influential band, just unbelievable, and they've of course influenced just tons and tons of people. And then another one on my list, probably, if I was ranking these, I'd probably say number two for being in my musical DNA, at least from an early age, and kickstarting an obsessiveness with music, is Van Halen in 1984. I was 12 years old. Jump. What can I say? You see that? It's like the coolest thing ever. I don't know. The combination of Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth and the whole band, it just sounded so good, and it kind of cut through some of the imitators too. I remember listening to, I was fifth grade, like Quiet Riot and Motley Crue, and then we were kind of arguing. I remember I was arguing with friends which was better, like Quiet Riot or Motley Crue. And then this album came out, and it's like, who cares? And I had a battle with my parents about buying this because there's an angel smoking on the cover. And I would go to battle with them, why can't I get this, whatever, when Jump came out. But when Panama came out, I lost my shit, and I just wouldn't let up until I bought this very copy, which I still have, and it's in pretty good condition too. Next on my list is somebody who has, I think, you can look at two different careers. He was singer-songwriter, kind of doing this jazz beat poet thing in the 70s, and then in the 80s he completely reinvented himself, and in my mind did work that's leaps and bounds ahead of what he did in the 70s. Like people have different camps, but I think it probably depends on when you got into him too. I got into him with Bone Machine. I can't show that because it's not on vinyl, or I definitely don't have it on vinyl. Hopefully it'll get re-released at some point. One I would recommend though is Mule Variations, which I always consider the follow-up to Bone Machine, although you've got the Black Rider in there, which I would encourage anyone that's just getting into Tom Waits to run as far away from as possible. It's definitely an acquired taste, but yeah, Tom Waits, just incredible what he can do, so interesting. I was just obsessed with Bone Machine when I was in college. It came out in like 1992. Just great album, as is this one, and as are several other albums of his, especially the ones that are on Island Records. Another one I'd be completely remiss if I did not talk about it is an album by Wilco. And just for some context here, it's 1996. I had already heard R.E.M. I don't think I had it. I don't know if I heard the whole record, but I was familiar with them. I knew Box Full of Letters. They played it on the radio station in Minneapolis a lot. I knew Passenger Side. I knew like most of the songs off that record, and I had seen them live. Knew who Jeff Tweedy was. Knew that he was a band called Uncle Tupelo. I had friends that were listening to Uncle Tupelo. I didn't get into it. It didn't. It seemed like a genre exercise. It didn't. It didn't really speak to me. Like, it's just traditional country thing, and then sort of this punk thing. Now I've come to respect them later, and I appreciate them, especially I think "Still Feel Gone" and Anodyne for sure, and the album they did with Peter Buck, March 20th through 16th through 20th, or 20th through 24th. I think it's 16th through 20th. Learned to really like that stuff, but at the time, I hadn't heard all of it. Mostly, I think it was the album No Depression, which is still probably my least favorite. Um, and when Jeff Tweedy came through as Wilco, I was seeing him as, or the band opening up for Pavement, who I was super into. First Avenue in Minneapolis, they have this huge like barrier upstairs. You go up on the balcony and you can. There's a bar there, a big bar, and there's a barrier, sound barrier, so you can stand back there and you can talk to people and you can talk without yelling. And I did that. I did that through most of Wilco's set, if not all of it. I think I kind of remember making my way up for Pavement. I got up pretty close. I might have seen the last couple songs of Wilco. Not that I didn't like them. I just didn't really pay attention that much. Flash forward a year, it's 1996, and my friend Dawn, who worked at the Electric Fetus, she gives me a promo of being there. This one, actually. I think the corner's cut out down here. She gives it to me, and I'm instantly intrigued by it. It's a double record. It's got just a cool album cover. I just really dug the album cover. I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna listen to this. And it was at a time when I was buying records again, like getting a lot of the classics rock stuff. It was like midnight, like '96. So I put it on, and I'm just like instantly hypnotized by it. From the moment of Misunderstood, albums. It seemed like every side opened up with like a killer track in my mind, like Sunken Treasure or Red Eyed and Blue. Uh, The Lonely One at the end of side four, and then you had some rockers in there. Forget the Flowers, a great country song. Just a really good album. And I saw them live twice on this tour, and pretty much every tour they've ever done since then. It's a different band. There's a lineup now which is great, but there was something a little bit more. I thought special about the initial lineup of Wilco, at least the time when I saw him in like '96 and on this album and Summer Teeth. And just great shows. I remember like one time, probably the first time I saw them on the Being There tour, Jeff Tweedy was like in pajamas, and it just was like this kind of around Thanksgiving, cold day outside. It was really warm inside, and just had this super cool vibe. And I followed him ever since. I love his songwriting. I love watching him grow and adapt and be such a family man now, and just like follow. They're consistent through all the years. So yeah, I would be it'd be a mistake for me not to mention Wilco. The next one I want to talk about are these 23 artists that are super pivotal to me as a listener and as a consumer of music, and also as like a songwriter, somebody who respects the craft and engages in the craft, is Lucinda Williams. Now, I had first heard of her on Vic Chestnut's album West of Rome. He has a song called Lucinda Williams, and I was like, who is this? And it wasn't until a few years later that she put out Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. I recognized the name, hadn't heard anything about it, picked it up. I remember it was a super hot day in Minneapolis, like super humid, like really, really hot. And I was in my apartment, and I played it, and I cracked open a beer, and then I played it again and again and again. I must have listened to it like 4 or 5 times that day, just drinking beer, and it was like the coolest thing ever. I absolutely love the stories on this. I love Lucinda. I think she's ridiculously talented. Um, this, especially Essence, is great. The one after it. I mean, you can start pretty much anywhere, but this probably has to be in your collection if you're into Lucinda Williams or alt country or just good songwriters. I mean, I think most people know all about her, but I don't think you can overstate how special Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, that period of Lucinda Williams, was for everyone, for her, and for me as a listener too. Like, wow, unbelievable. Great record, great artist. The next one I'm doing for the 23 like most influential artists to me at a pivotal age, or artists that are in my musical DNA, is, we're getting to the Y's here, is Neil Young. Now I'm currently doing a countdown of all of his records, so I'm listening to a lot of Neil. And when thinking about what to show, it's like, oh, I was going to show like Tonight's the Night or On the Beach, something like that. But really, it has to be the one that where it all began for me, where I started listening to him a lot and had to get everything right. And that started really with Harvest Moon, and it was everywhere. I mean, everybody listened. It was like one of the most popular records of '92 for sure. Even non-music fans were like really into this record. And I saw him on the tour, or I guess it was with Booker T and the MGs. I'm not sure it was the official tour for this album. That probably came later, the way that Neil works. But a great, unbelievable, great show, really fun. And of course, I got into all of the other stuff. Neil started out, I'd already, before this album came out, I think I had Rust Never Sleeps and Harvest, maybe. But yeah, this made me get everything, and began the whole obsessiveness with Neil, or getting into Neil. And Neil's been a really interesting artist for me too, because I think there were periods where I kind of thought I was I don't know, I didn't listen to him anymore. It started a lot again for me when I moved to the West Coast, living in San Francisco. I mean, I was kind of in his backyard. It made sense. It sounded good driving up Pacific Coast Highway and listening to one of his records. Just phenomenal artist. Definitely an inspiration. You can do things very simply, put your heart into it, write some good tunes. And that's just the songwriting part of it. I mean, listening to his guitar tone, the way he communicates through the guitar, his voice, the energy he has between different band members, the way he records records, the way it's all like, analog for him, and it's a take of it. Not There's no studio trickery. He's not sitting there at behind a Pro Tools and doing take after take and trying to get everything just perfect. No, I mean, his albums have a lot of flaws in them, but some of them are absolutely perfect. But would much rather have like a hit and miss kind of thing going on than have like these absolutely thought over to death kind of records that a lot of artists do. Anyway, Neil Young. So that's it for me. Those are the 23 that I was thinking of. There's so many others too that were pivotal around that time. But as far as like getting to the obsessiveness, or really things that I think influenced me going forward, those are probably my 23. Thanks again to the dark stuff. I think this is a great topic. Please, if you're watching this, please try doing one too. Please do one. I think it's an interesting exercise. And yeah, as soon as I watched that video, I was like, yep, I'm going to do that. So, and that was just yesterday. So anyway, thanks.